Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. Dead Drift. Let me tell you a little something about the middle to lower Laguna Madre. Largest hypersaline lagoon in Texas, maybe the world, depending on who you ask. Padre Island on one side, King Ranch on the other, and in between, nothing. Miles and miles of shallow flats, spoil islands, and water so salty it'll cure a cut or kill an engine if you're not careful. No telephone poles out here, no cell towers, no houses, except a handful of floating cabins here and there. You run out of gas or your motor gives up, you better hope somebody knows where you went. Because nobody's coming to find you by accident, nobody's stumbling across you on their way somewhere else. There is no somewhere else, there's just the water and the sky and whatever's swimming beneath you. My name's Colton Redwell. I'm 34 years old, and I've been running fishing charters out of Baffin Bay since I was 18. Walked across the stage at Riviera High School on a Friday, had my captain's license by Monday, and never looked back. 16 years on this water now. 16 years of sunrises and sunsets and everything in between. Wade fishing mostly. Take clients out on the flats, power pole down, slip over the side into knee-deep water, and hunt for the big trout that cruise the grass beds and sand pockets. Trophy trout, 30 inches or better. That's what everybody wants. That's what Kevin Green wanted when he booked me for January 16th. Kevin was a friend of the Adams, regular clients of mine, good people. They said Kevin was solid, experienced angler, wouldn't complain about the cold, just wanted a shot at a wall hanger. Sounded perfect. I should have listened to Cliff. Cliff Bell's been fishing these waters since before I was born. 71 years old, Texas Fishing Hall of Fame, the kind of man who's forgotten more about the Laguna Madre than most people will ever learn. When Cliff talks, smart people listen. I saw him at the dock the evening before the charter. He was hosing down his flats boat, moving slow the way he does now, and he waved me over. "Colton, you running tomorrow?" "Yes, sir. Got a client wants a trophy trout." He nodded, didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there with a hose dripping, staring out at the water like he was looking for something. "Things been off lately." He shook his head slow. "Can't put my finger on it. Fish are still there, but the birds ain't right. Saw a whole flock of gulls just sitting on the water yesterday. Not diving, not feeding, just sitting there." He looked at me, watching. "Watching what?" "Hell if I know." He spat in the sand. "And the deer on the King Ranch side? They won't come near the water no more. Not even at dawn. Probably just the cold front coming through. Maybe." He didn't sound convinced. "Animals know things we don't, son. When they start acting wrong, something's coming." He turned back to his boat. "Just keep your eyes open out there." I told him I would. I should have asked him what he meant, should have pressed him, should have seen the look in his eyes for what it was, not confusion, but fear. Cliff Bell, who'd survived 3 hurricanes in a capsized boat in the intracoastal, was afraid of something. But I didn't ask. I just loaded my gear, checked my boat, and went home to get some sleep before a 4 a.m. alarm. I didn't know it would be the last normal night of my life. I didn't know about Los Lobos del Mar, the wolves of the sea. The alarm went off at 4. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep, kept thinking about what Cliff said, kept seeing the look on his face, the way his hands had tightened on the hose when he talked about the birds. Cliff wasn't the type to spook easy. Wasn't the type to see omens in animal behavior. But something had him rattled. I shook it off, made coffee, loaded the truck. The usual routine. same as 1,000 mornings before. By 4:30, I was backing the trailer down the ramp at marker 37, my 24-foot flats boat sliding into black water that reflected nothing but stars. Launch went smooth, got the boat tied off, parked the truck and trailer, and idled out of the marina into the channel. Stars everywhere, no wind. The kind of morning that usually makes me grateful for this life. I was maybe 2 miles out, running south through the main channel, when I saw it. The wolf. It was standing on the dunes to the east, maybe 300 yards off my port side, just standing there, perfectly still, silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. Even at that distance, I could tell it was big, bigger than any coyote, shoulders that came up past my waist, easy, a head that was broad and heavy, and it was watching me. I pulled back on the throttle, let the boat drift, and stared. 16 years on this water, I've seen a lot of wildlife. Deer, javelina, bobcats, even a mountain lion once out past the land cut, but I'd never seen a wolf, never even heard of one this far south. The red wolves that used to roam the Texas coast went extinct decades ago. That's what the wildlife books say, anyway. But there it was, standing on those dunes like it owned them, not running, not hiding, just watching me with eyes I couldn't see but could somehow feel. I sat there for probably 30 seconds, coffee going cold in my hand, waiting for it to move. It didn't. Just stood there, patient as stone, that massive head tracking me as I started to ease the throttle forward again. Coyote, I told myself. Big coyote. Trick of the light. I didn't believe it, but I said it anyway. Because the alternative that I'd just seen something that wasn't supposed to exist was too much to process at 4:30 in the morning with a client to pick up and a charter to run. I pushed the throttle back up and kept heading south. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Kevin Green was waiting at the marina when I pulled up to the dock. Big guy, maybe 6'2", with the kind of deep tan you get from years of outdoor work. He was already in his waders, rod tube over his shoulder, and he smiled when he saw the boat. Colton, Kevin Green, the Adams told me you're the best guide in Baffin Bay. I don't know about best, I said, shaking his hand. But I know where the fish are. Let's go find you that trophy. He climbed aboard and we headed out. The sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange. It was going to be a beautiful day. Cold, maybe 45 degrees with a wind chill, but beautiful. We made small talk as I ran south toward my first spot. Kevin was from San Antonio, did something in construction, had been fishing his whole life but never made it down to the Laguna Madre. The Adams had been telling him for years that he needed to experience it. They said there's nothing else like it, Kevin said, looking out at the water stretching to the horizon in every direction. I'm starting to see what they mean. No, sir, there isn't. This is the Wild West of fishing. No rules out here except the ones the water makes. He laughed at that. Seemed like a good guy, easy to talk to, the kind of client that makes a long day on the water feel short. I had no idea I'd be watching him die in 6 hours. The morning was good, better than good. I put us on a flat about 15 miles south of the marina, a spot where the sand drops off into a deeper channel and the big trout like to cruise. Power pole down, we slipped over the side into knee-deep water that was cold enough to make you gasp, even through the waders. Kevin could cast, really cast tight loops, perfect accuracy, the kind of technique that takes years to develop. Within an hour he'd landed 3 solid trout, none of them trophies but all of them respectable, 24 inches, 26, 23. Man, this is incredible, he said, releasing the third one. I can see why the Adams love it down here. Just wait, the big girls usually show up around midday. They like to cruise the edges when the sun gets high. We fished, we talked, we watched pelicans dive, and laughed when a redfish tail popped up 20 feet away like a little orange flag waving at us. Normal stuff, good stuff. The kind of morning that reminds you why you do this job. Around 10:30, I noticed something. We'd moved to a different flat, closer to a chain of spoil islands that run parallel to the King Ranch shoreline. I was scanning the water for nervous bait, the little flickers that tell you predators are nearby, when movement on one of the islands caught my eye. I raised my binoculars and felt my stomach drop. There was a wolf on the island. Not a wolf, the wolf. Same size, same posture, same way of standing perfectly still and staring directly at me like it could see through the binoculars as easily as I could see through them. But that was impossible. This island was almost 20 miles from where I'd seen it that morning. 20 miles of open water, deep channels, mud flats that would swallow anything trying to walk across them. No wolf could cover that distance in 6 hours. No wolf could even survive the swim. The currents in the Laguna Madre are deceptive, and the salt content would dehydrate any animal that tried to cross. And yet there it was, watching me. "Everything okay?" Kevin asked. He'd noticed me frozen with the binoculars. "Yeah." I lowered them slowly. "Yeah, just thought I saw something. Probably just a coyote." "Out here, on an island?" "They swim sometimes, looking for bird eggs." The lie came easy, too easy. "It's nothing." But I kept glancing at that island as we fished, kept expecting to see movement, kept expecting that shape to be gone when I looked back. It wasn't. Every time I checked, it was still there, still watching, still waiting. For what? I didn't know. I was about to find out. The hit came around 2 in the afternoon. We'd moved again, working a grass bed on the edge of a deep channel. The water was chest deep here, which I don't usually like. Harder to move, harder to fight a big fish, harder to see what's moving beneath you, but Kevin had spotted tailing reds and wanted a shot at them. "Just a few more casts," he'd said. "Then we can move somewhere shallower." I should have said no. Should have trusted my instincts, the ones screaming at me that something was wrong, that we shouldn't be out this deep, this far from the boat. But Kevin was a paying client, and he was having a good time, and I told myself I was being paranoid. He was about 40 yards from me, working the edge of the grass, when he let out a whoop. "Got one. Big one." His rod was bent double, lines screaming off the reel. Whatever he'd hooked was running hard toward the deep water, and from the way his rod was pulsing, it had some serious weight. "Keep the tip up," I called, starting to wade toward him. "Let him run, tire him out." "This thing is a monster." Kevin was laughing, fighting the fish, having the time of his life. His face was lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. "This might be the one, Colton. This might be my trophy." I was smiling too, couldn't help it. This is why I do this job, that moment when everything comes together, when all the early mornings and long hours pay off and you get to watch someone experience something they'll remember for the rest of their life. The rest of their life. God, if I'd only known how short that was about to be. Then the water exploded. Not where Kevin's line entered the water. Behind him, maybe 15 feet behind him, between him and me. Something came up, something big. I didn't get a clear look, it happened too fast. Just a massive swirl and a spray of water that caught the sunlight, but I saw the size of it. I saw the way the water displaced, the way the wave rolled outward from the impact point. This wasn't a fish. This wasn't a shark, and sharks don't come into the Laguna Madre anyway. Too shallow, too salty. Old-timers say they've seen maybe 1 or 2 in 20-plus years of fishing these waters. This was something else entirely. Whatever had just surfaced was the size of a truck, the size of something that shouldn't exist. Kevin felt it before he saw it. I watched his expression change in slow motion, the joy of the fight transforming into confusion as he registered the wave hitting him from behind, the splash of water against his back, the sudden wrongness in the air. He started to turn. He never finished. The water around him erupted. 1 second he was standing there, chest deep, rod still in his hands, that smile still half-formed on his face. The next second something had him by the legs and he was going down. Colton. That's all he got out. Just my name. Just that one word, sharp and high and terrified. His hands came up, reaching for something to grab, but there was nothing but air and water and me, too far away to help. Then he was under. The water churned, frothed, turned dark with something that billowed up from below blood, I realized. So much blood, spreading across the surface like an oil slick, turning the clear green water into something red and wrong. I was already moving, already screaming his name, already trying to close that 40-yard gap even though I knew there was nothing I could do. The water was chest deep and my legs felt like they were moving through concrete. Kevin! Kevin! Kevin came up once, just once. His face broke the surface maybe 10 feet from where he'd gone under. His mouth was open, gasping for air. His hands were clawing at the water, trying to find purchase on something solid. And his eyes found mine. I will never forget those eyes, the terror in them, the confusion, the desperate, pleading hope that I could somehow save him, that I could close the distance, grab his hand, pull him to safety. He reached for me. Our fingers were maybe 20 feet apart. Then he was pulled back down, harder this time, faster, violent. I heard something, a sound I never want to hear again, like wet rope snapping, like bones breaking, like the sound a deer makes when a car hits it at 70 miles per hour. The water swallowed him like he'd never existed. I stopped moving, stood there in chest-deep water, the blood spreading around me, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my teeth, staring at the spot where Kevin Green had been standing 5 seconds ago. 5 seconds, that's all it took. 5 seconds to end a man's life. 5 seconds to turn a perfect day into a nightmare. The churning stopped. The water went still, and something floated to the surface. At first I thought it was seaweed, just a clump of something brown and matted, drifting on the gentle current, riding the ripples out from that terrible still spot. But seaweed doesn't drift toward you. Seaweed doesn't move against the wind. I reached out and grabbed it before I could stop myself, before my brain could tell my hand what a terrible idea that was. Fur, thick, coarse, reddish-brown, the color of rust, the color of dried blood, the color of something that had no business being in hypersaline water 20 miles from shore. Wolf fur. I held it in my hand, this impossible thing, and felt my entire understanding of the world crack down the middle. The wolf, the one on the dunes that morning, the one on the Spoil Island just hours ago. It wasn't watching me. It was hunting me. And whatever lived in this water, whatever had just pulled Kevin Green down into the dark and torn him apart like he was made of paper, was part of the same thing. The same creature. Different form. I dropped the fur like it was on fire, stumbled backward, nearly went under myself as my feet tangled in the grass, as the blood-warm water sloshed around my chest. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a howl. I ran. Didn't Wade ran, churning through chest-deep water, not caring about the noise, not caring about anything except getting back to the boat, getting out of the water, getting somewhere, anywhere that wasn't here. The boat was 200 yards away. It felt like 200 miles. I made it. Don't know how, but I made it. Grabbed the ladder, hauled myself up, collapsed on the deck, and lay there gasping and shaking and trying to convince myself that what I'd just seen wasn't real. It was real. Kevin was gone, and I was alone. The motor wouldn't start. I turned the key and got nothing, not even a click. The battery was fine. I checked it that morning, same as always, but the engine was dead, completely dead. I tried again, and again, and again. Nothing. I popped the engine cover, checked the connections, checked the fuel line, checked everything I could think of. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing was wrong, as far as I could tell. The motor should have fired right up, same as it had 10,000 times before. But it didn't. I was stranded, 20+ miles from the marina. No cell signal I checked, even though I knew there wouldn't be one. No other boats in sight. No one knew exactly where I was. I told the marina I was heading south, but south covers a lot of water. And the sun was going down. I watched it sink toward the King Ranch shoreline, painting the sky in those insane pinks and oranges that only happen out here, like God spilled his paint across the heavens. Under any other circumstances, it would have been beautiful, the kind of sunset you take pictures of, the kind you remember for years. Now it just meant darkness was coming, and I had a very bad feeling about what darkness would bring. I took inventory. Flare gun with 4 flares, a filleting knife, a small emergency kit with some first aid supplies, a flashlight, and a signaling mirror that wouldn't do me any good until morning, 2 bottles of water, a bag of beef jerky I had brought for lunch. Not much, not nearly enough, but it was what I had. I pulled up the power pole and let the boat drift. No point staying where I was if something in that water had killed Kevin. I didn't want to be anchored right on top of it. Better to drift with the current, put some distance between me and that spot, and hope I ended up somewhere closer to the channel where another boat might see me. The sun touched the horizon. The pink faded to purple, then to gray, then to something darker. The light faded fast. The pink became purple, became gray, became black, and within 30 minutes of the sun disappearing, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The Laguna Madre at night is dark. City people don't understand what dark means. They've never experienced the absence of light, the complete and total blackness that exists when you're 30 miles from the nearest street lamp, the nearest porch light, the nearest anything. Out here, dark is a physical thing. It presses against you. It fills your eyes with nothing. It makes you question whether you've gone blind, whether the world still exists, whether anything is real anymore. I sat in that darkness and waited. And on a spoil island, maybe 300 yards to the east, I saw them. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, some reflection, some optical illusion created by my fear-addled brain. But my eyes adjusted, and I realized I was seeing shapes silhouetted against the stars. The Milky Way was bright out here, bright enough to give the faintest outline to the world. 2 shapes, standing on the sand, not on 4 legs, on 2. They were tall, taller than any wolf should be, 7 feet, maybe 8, with proportions that were all wrong. Too long in the limbs, too narrow in the chest, shoulders that hunched forward, heads that were still canine, long snouts, pointed ears but mounted on bodies that were trying to be something else, something human. They weren't moving, just standing there, side by side, facing my boat. I could feel their eyes on me even though it was too dark to see their faces. I could feel them watching, evaluating, deciding. My hand found the flare gun. I raised it, pointed it at the shapes. My arm was shaking so bad I could barely keep it steady. They didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't move at all. Then one of them tilted its head back and howled. I've heard coyotes, heard them yipping and crying in the night, a sound so common in South Texas that most people don't even notice it anymore. I've heard wolves on nature documentaries, that long, mournful call that's supposed to be haunting and beautiful. I've heard sounds in the night that I couldn't explain and chose not to think about. This was different. This was a sound that reached into my chest and squeezed, a sound that was somehow wet, somehow hungry, somehow ancient in a way that made my hindbrain scream at me to run even though there was nowhere to go. It wasn't a wolf howl and it wasn't a human scream, it was something in between, something that shouldn't exist. something that spoke to a part of me that had been dormant since my ancestors huddled in caves and prayed for the sun to rise. The other one joined in, two voices harmonizing in a key that shouldn't exist, rising and falling in a pattern that felt deliberate, communicating, coordinating, calling. And then, from the water from somewhere close, somewhere 200 close, something answered. A low sound, a vibration more than a noise, something that I felt in my bones and my teeth and the base of my skull, something that came from beneath the boat. The water beside my boat rippled. I fired the flare. The red light arced across the sky, illuminating everything in hellish crimson. For one frozen moment, I saw them clearly, the two figures on the island, caught mid-howl, their mouths open too wide, their teeth too long, their eyes reflecting the flare light like mirrors. They weren't wolves. They weren't human. There was something else, something older, something that had been wearing both shapes since before either word existed. And in the water, maybe 20 feet from my boat, I saw a shape, dark, massive, moving toward me. Then the flare hit the water and sizzled out, and everything went black. The night lasted forever. I sat in the center of my boat, knife in one hand, flare gun in the other, listening. The flashlight was in my pocket, but I didn't dare use it, didn't want to see what was out there. Didn't want to draw their attention any more than I already had. The sounds were the worst part. The Laguna Madre at night has its own soundtrack. Wind across the water, constant and whispering. Small waves lapping at the hull like something tasting the fiberglass. The distant crash of surf on the Padre Island beaches, miles away, a reminder that there was a world beyond this darkness. Tiny splashes from baitfish jumping, fleeing from something in the darkness below. I'd heard these sounds 1,000 times before, 1,000 nights anchored out here, waiting for dawn, listening to the water breathe around me. It had always been peaceful, hypnotic, even. Not tonight. Tonight there were other sounds mixed in, sounds that didn't belong. Breathing, heavy, wet, breathing from somewhere off the starboard side. Not constant, it would come and go, sometimes loud enough that I could pinpoint it, sometimes so soft I wondered if I was imagining it. But I wasn't imagining it. Something was out there, circling my boat, breathing in the darkness. Splashing, not baitfish, something bigger, something moving with purpose, pushing through the shallow water with a rhythm that sounded almost like footsteps. Sometimes close enough that I could feel the vibration through the hull, sometimes far away, over by the Spoil Islands. Sometimes directly behind me, and I'd spin around with a knife raised, staring at nothing. And occasionally, from the Spoil Islands scattered around me, that howl, rising and falling like a siren, getting closer, then farther, then closer again. Two voices, sometimes three, harmonizing in ways that made my skin crawl. They were circling me, toying with me, playing with their food. I tried to think, tried to make a plan, but terror has a way of emptying your mind, of leaving nothing but animal instinct and the overwhelming urge to run even when there's nowhere to run to. What did I know? They were in the water and on the land, the same creature, maybe, different forms for different hunting grounds. They'd taken Kevin in seconds, no warning, no chance, just gone. They could take me just as easily. So why hadn't they? The boat. Maybe the boat was a barrier somehow. Maybe they couldn't or wouldn't climb aboard. Maybe there was something about the fiberglass, the metal, the shape of it that kept them at bay. Or maybe they were just waiting. Maybe they wanted me to suffer first. Around midnight, the sounds changed. The breathing got louder, closer. I could hear something moving through the water now, not splashing, but wading. The sound of legs pushing through knee-deep water. The sound of something walking toward me. And from the other side of the boat, another set of footsteps. They were converging, coming at me from both sides. I raised the flare gun, pointed it at nothing, at everything. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a sound directly beside the boat, not in the water, but on the hull. Something scraping against the fiberglass. Claws. Long claws dragging across the side of my boat, slow and deliberate. Testing. Tasting. I pressed my back against the center console and prayed. Actually prayed, for the first time since I was a child. Prayed to God, to Jesus, to whatever was listening. Please. Please don't let me die out here. Please don't let me end up like Kevin. The scraping stopped. The breathing retreated. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, that laugh. Not a howl, a laugh, something that was trying to sound human but didn't quite get it right. Something mocking, something that knew exactly how scared I was and found it funny. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep. Just sat there with my weapons ready, listening to them circle, listening to them play, listening to the longest night of my life tick by one terrible second at a time. I understood then what Cliff had been trying to tell me, what he'd been too afraid or too smart to say out loud. The animals knew, the birds sitting and watching, the deer staying away from the water. They could sense what was out there, what had always been out there. The wolves of the sea, the old-timers called them. Los Lobos del Mar, in the stories the Mexican fishing guides told after too many beers. I don't know how I knew the name. Maybe I'd heard it somewhere, some old story from one of the guides, some legend passed down from the days before this was Texas. Or maybe the name just came to me, rising up from whatever ancient part of the human brain remembers things it was never taught, things our ancestors knew, things we've forgotten. Either way, I knew. And I knew I probably wasn't going to survive the night. Around 2 in the morning, something hit the boat. Not hard, not trying to capsize me, just a bump, a nudge, like something very large brushing against the hull to see what I'd do. I held my breath, gripped the knife tighter. Another bump, harder this time. The boat rocked, water splashed over the gunwale, cold against my legs. Something was testing the hull, probing for weakness, learning the shape of my little floating island. I felt the boat shift as weight pressed against the starboard side. Something was leaning on it, something heavy. The gunwale dipped toward the water, and I had to brace myself to keep from sliding. Then the weight released. The boat rocked back level. Silence. Then I heard the sound of something pulling itself out of the water, the wet slap of limbs on sand. It had retreated to one of the spoil islands. More footsteps in the water, from the port side now, coming from the other direction. I was surrounded. I turned on the flashlight. I shouldn't have. I knew I shouldn't have. Every instinct screamed at me to stay in the dark, to not see, to let ignorance protect me from whatever was out there, but the not knowing was worse. The imagination filling in blanks with horrors that couldn't be real. I needed to see, needed to know what I was up against. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the water. Nothing. I swung it left, right, behind me. Nothing. Just black water and distant shapes of spoil islands in the endless dark sky. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the stress and the fear and the exhaustion were making me hear sounds that weren't there. Then I swept the beam to the right one more time, and saw them. Eyes. 30 feet away, just above the surface of the water, a pair of eyes reflected my flashlight beam. Yellow, glowing, fixed on me with an intensity that stopped my heart. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that they were too high, too far above the waterline. Whatever those eyes belonged to was standing in water that should have been chest deep on a man. Standing, not swimming, on 2 legs. I saw the shape of it for just a moment, tall, impossibly tall, with shoulders too broad and a head that was wrong, that was canine but also somehow not, Water streamed off its body. Its mouth was open, and I could see teeth, so many teeth. Then it submerged, without a ripple, without a splash, just gone, sinking into the black water like it had never been there, like something that massive could just disappear into knee-deep water and cease to exist. I turned off the flashlight. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I sat in the darkness, listened to the water, listened to my own panicked breathing, and from somewhere close, too close, right beside the boat, I heard breathing that matched my own. In, out, synchronized, mocking. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for death. It didn't come. I don't know why. I've thought about it every day since, running through possibilities, searching for explanations. None of them make sense. None of them bring me any peace. They could have taken me, could have tipped the boat, dragged me into the water, done to me what they'd done to Kevin. The hull of a 24-foot flats boat is nothing to something that size. A man with a knife and 3 remaining flares is nothing. But they didn't. Maybe they were full. Maybe Kevin had satisfied whatever hunger drove them, and I was just entertainment, something to play with, something to terrify. Maybe they were saving me for later. The way a cat saves a mouse, it doesn't want to eat just yet. Maybe they'd come back for me tomorrow night, or next week, or next year. Or maybe, and this is the thought that keeps me up at night, the one that makes me check every window and lock every door, maybe they wanted me to live. Maybe they wanted a witness. Someone to tell people what happened. Someone to spread the fear. Someone to make sure the next fisherman who ventures too far into the Laguna Madre does so with a chill down his spine and a knowledge that he's not alone out there. Maybe they wanted me to do exactly what I'm doing right now, telling this story, making sure it spreads, making sure people know. I don't know. I'll never know. What I know is that the longest night of my life eventually ended. The sky to the east started to lighten, turning from black to gray to the faintest suggestion of pink. The howling stopped. The splashing stopped. The breathing in the darkness stopped. I sat there as the world slowly came back into existence, not daring to move, not daring to believe it was really over. And around 6 a.m., when the first real light was starting to spread across the water and I could finally see the empty spoil islands and the empty flats and the very empty water around me, I heard something beautiful. An outboard motor. Far away at first. Just a distant buzz, like a mosquito on the horizon, but getting louder, getting closer. I scrambled for my flare gun, loaded one of my remaining flares, and fired it straight up. The red light streaked into the dawn sky, a beacon, a prayer, a desperate scream for help. The motor changed pitch, turned toward me, and 20 minutes later, Zach Williams pulled up alongside my boat. Zach Williams saved my life. He was running out early, hoping to get a head start on a charter, when he saw my flare go up. Changed course immediately, ran full throttle toward the light, and found me drifting in the middle of the channel, about 5 miles from where I'd started. I don't remember what I looked like when he found me. Don't remember much of anything from those first few minutes. Just his face young, 24 years old, confused and increasingly frightened as he took in my appearance. Later, he told me I'd been sitting in the exact center of the boat, knees pulled to my chest, knife in one hand and flare gun in the other. My eyes were open, but I wasn't really seeing anything. I was covered in dried salt spray and what he initially thought was mud, but turned out to be blood. Kevin's blood, still on my waders from when I tried to reach him. Colton? Colton? What happened? Where's your client? I couldn't answer. My mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I'd forgotten how to speak. Forgotten that speaking was something people did. Zach climbed aboard my boat, checked me for injuries, found nothing physical, which almost seemed to scare him more. Colton, you're freaking me out, man. Talk to me. What happened out here? I managed one word, just one. Wolves. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. And maybe I had. Maybe the night had broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. He tried my motor. It started on the first turn. Of course it did. Whatever had killed my engine the night before, whatever had stranded me in the dark with those things, it was gone now. The motor ran smooth and clean, like nothing had ever been wrong with it. Zach towed me back to the marina anyway. I don't think he trusted me to drive. I don't think I would have trusted me either. The whole way back, I kept looking at the water, kept looking at the spoil islands we passed, kept expecting to see shapes, kept expecting to see eyes. I didn't see anything, but I knew they were there, somewhere, watching. They're always watching. The Coast Guard searched for Kevin Green for 3 days. Helicopters, dive teams, every fishing guide in Baffin Bay joining the effort, running grid patterns across hundreds of square miles of water. They never found him. Not a body, not equipment, not even his rod, which had still been in his hands when he went under. The Laguna Madre had swallowed him completely, and it wasn't giving him back. I told the investigators that he'd been attacked by something in the water. I told them about the size of it, the speed of it, the way he'd been pulled under. I told them about the fur floating to the surface. I didn't tell them about the wolves. Some things you can't explain to people who haven't seen them. Some things, if you try to explain, just make people think you've lost your mind, and maybe I have. Maybe that night broke something in me that can't be fixed. But I know what I saw, and I know they're still out there. I haven't run a charter since January 16th. Can't make myself do it. Can't make myself take someone out on that water, knowing what's swimming beneath us, knowing what's watching from the dunes, knowing that any moment, without warning, the water could explode and someone else could be dragged down into the dark. I tried once, about 3 weeks after it happened. Thought maybe getting back on the horse would help, maybe facing the fear would make it smaller. Got as far as the boat ramp, sat in my truck for an hour, staring at the water, watching the way the light played across the surface, watching for shapes. Then I drove home. Haven't tried again since. Cliff came to see me about a week after it happened, pulled up in his old Ford, walked up to my porch with that slow, careful gait he has now, and sat down in the chair next to mine without saying a word. We sat there for a long time, watching the water, watching the dunes, not talking. Finally, he spoke. "You saw them." It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "How many?" "2 on land, 1 in the water. Maybe the same thing. I don't know how it works. Don't know if they're all the same creature or if there's more than one. Don't know anything, really." I shook my head. "Except that they're real." Cliff nodded slowly. His hands were folded in his lap, and I noticed they were trembling slightly. The hands of a 71-year-old man who'd been keeping a secret for most of his life. The wolves of the sea, that's what my grandfather used to call them. Old Mexican stories, from before the border meant anything. Said the Karankawa knew them first. Said the Spanish missionaries wrote about devil wolves that walked from sea to shore, that hunted in the water and on the land. He paused. "I always thought they were just stories, campfire stuff. The kind of thing old men tell to scare children. You said you saw one." "Once, 40 years ago. I was running a charter way south, past the land cut, farther than most people go. It was getting dark, and I saw something on one of the spoil islands. Thought it was a coyote at first, but..." He trailed off, shook his head. It stood up, just for a second. Stood up on 2 legs, looked at me, and then went back down on all 4s and disappeared. "Jesus, Cliff." I told myself it was a trick of the light. Told myself I'd been out in the sun too long. Told myself anything except what I knew was true. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet. And then I never went back to that spot. Never took clients that far south again. Never talked about it, never thought about it if I could help it. Just pretended it never happened. Why didn't you warn me? Really warn me? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. Because I wanted to believe they were gone. Because nobody's seen them in decades, not clearly, not for sure. The stories stopped. The sightings stopped. I thought maybe they died off, or moved on, or gone back to wherever they came from. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I thought if I didn't talk about them, they wouldn't be real anymore. They're real. I know. They killed my client, Kevin Green. Good man. Had a wife. Had kids. Came out here to catch a trophy trout and something dragged him under and tore him apart. And it's my fault, Cliff. I took him out there. I put him in that water. Cliff reached over and gripped my arm, hard. No, you didn't know. You couldn't have known. Whatever happened out there, it's not your fault. Tell that to his wife. He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did I. We sat there as the sun went down, watching the pink sky fade over King Ranch, watching the shadows stretch across the water. Neither of us said another word. When it got dark, Cliff stood up, patted my shoulder, and drove away. I haven't seen him since. Heard he's not taking charters anymore either. Heard he sold his boat, moved in with his daughter in Corpus Christi. Can't say I blame him. Some things, once you've seen them, you can't pretend they're not real anymore. The Texas red wolf was declared extinct in the wild in 1980. That's the official story, anyway. The last wild populations were captured and placed in breeding programs. The species, as far as science is concerned, no longer exists outside of captivity. But science doesn't know everything. Science doesn't account for the stories the Karankawa told around their fires, long before Europeans came with their guns and their diseases and their certainty about how the world worked. Stories about wolves that weren't quite wolves, creatures that could walk on land or swim in the sea, hunters that had been here since the water rose and the barrier islands formed, since the first fish swam and the first birds flew. The wolves of the sea, Los Lobos del Mar, the old Mexican guides call them. They were here before us, before the Karankawa, before anyone. And they'll be here long after we're gone, hunting the flats, watching from the dunes, taking what they want from anyone foolish enough to venture into their territory. I think about Kevin Green sometimes, about his wife, who I had to call, about his kids, who will never know what really happened to their father, about the Adams, who recommended me as a guide, who will carry that guilt for the rest of their lives. I think about all the people who fish these waters every day, never knowing what's swimming beneath them, never knowing how close they come to something ancient and hungry every time they slip over the side of their boat. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe knowing would be worse. Maybe the not knowing is what lets people keep casting, keep waiting, keep living their lives as if the world makes sense. But I know, and I can't unknow. So if you ever find yourself in the middle to lower Laguna Madre, out past where the cell phones work and the landmarks disappear, I want you to do something for me. Look at the dunes. Look carefully. Because if you see something watching you, something big, something that stands too still, something with eyes that track your movement, like a predator evaluating prey, don't tell yourself it's a coyote. Don't tell yourself it's a trick of the light. Get back in your boat, fire up your motor, and run. Run and don't look back. Because the wolves of the sea are patient. They've been hunting for thousands of years, and they'll be hunting for thousands more. They don't need to chase you. They don't need to rush. They just need to wait. And sooner or later, if you keep coming to their water, they'll get their chance. I still live in Baffin Bay, still have my boat, even though I haven't used it since January. Still wake up at 4 a.m. sometimes, out of habit, and watch the sun rise over the Laguna Madre from my porch. People ask me why I don't move, why I don't leave this place, go somewhere inland. somewhere far from the water and the things that live in it. I don't have a good answer. Part of it is stubbornness, I guess. This is my home, has been since I was 18 years old. I built a life here, built a reputation, built a career. Running away feels like letting them win. But if I'm honest, there's another reason. I need to know. I need to know if they're still out there. Need to know if that night was an isolated incident or the beginning of something worse. Need to watch the water, watch the dunes, watch for signs that they're moving again. And I need to be here when, not if, but when they take someone else. Need to be able to say I tried to warn people. Need to be able to live with myself. It's still beautiful. That hasn't changed. The sunrises are still insane orange and gold spreading across the water like fire. The sunsets over King Ranch are still the kind of thing that makes you believe in God. The fish are still there, still swimming the flats, still chasing bait in the shallows. But I see it differently now. Well, boys and ghouls, that wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault. Poor Colton. Boo-hoo. Cry me a fucking river. 16 years on that water. 16 years of thinking he knew every channel, every flat, every secret the Laguna Madre had to offer, and it turns out he didn't know anything. None of us do. That's the thing about the wild places, isn't it? We think we've mapped them. We think we've cataloged every species, documented every predator, understood every danger. We've got GPS and fish finders and satellite phones, and we think that makes us safe. It doesn't. There are things in this world that don't show up on sonar. Things that were hunting these waters before humans existed. Things that will keep hunting long after we're gone. The wolves of the sea extinct, they say. Gone, they say. Nothing to worry about. Tell that to Kevin Green. If this story made you reconsider that fishing trip you've been planning, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every night at 8 p.m. Central, and trust me, there's plenty more lurking in the waters of the American coastline. Leave a like if you've ever felt something watching you from the shore, and drop a comment what's the most remote place you've ever been, and what did you see out there that you've never talked about. Remember, the water doesn't care how experienced you are. The water doesn't care how careful you are. The water takes what it wants, when it wants, and sometimes it's hungry for more than fish. Until next time, kiddies, watch the dunes, watch the water, and if something watches back, run. This has been your Late Night Creature Feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and some things are never really extinct.